You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a long time coming. I'm excited. Normally I have one, maybe two guests. This time there's a whole bunch of us, right? It's a good roundtable. So I'm going to kick it off with just kind of pitching it over to you, Pascal. Pascal and I work together at EY. We've known each other for a long time. This industry is so small. I love how much, even though I work for Morgan Franklin, you guys work for 1898. I don't see us as competitors. I see us as there's so much that we can do to lift up the needs in this space. And there's more work than any one of us can do or any one company can do. And I really feel that the more we work together, the work comes on the back end of this, right? So, yes, there's going to be times where we're going to be competing in a RFP or anything like that, but there's more times that we can go together and help each other and help the community. So I appreciate you guys taking time and being on my podcast today. So Pascal, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and we'll just kind of go around the horn.
Yeah, thanks for that. And yeah, by the way, you're absolutely right? So today we're working for 1898 or for Morgan Franklin, but next week or next year, that could be different again. So being friends, having those connections in the community is what's key to me, right? Yeah. It doesn't really matter who's paying for your t-shirts. But yeah, Pascal Ackermann, I'm the Senior Threat Protection and Response Engineer with 1898. That's a long title to basically say that I help our customers make sense of security events. But first of all, we'll try to help them discover security events in their environment, and then also try to make sense of it in a means that when there's something comes up, we have the staff to go out and say, hey, this is what this really means. This is really not really relevant to your environment, or it is. And then we have the team that can go on site and help recover, remediate, or in other way, shape or form, get the customer back up and running again. So I've been doing that for about a year now, but before this, I've been in controls and engineering and OT and ICS or whatever you want to call it these days since 1999. So if you followed my career path, I started off as a controls engineer. Then I started building resilient and secure network OT networks, and then I started attacking them. And now I'm basically combining all of those knowledges into the new role where we have a security operations center. Specifically designed for OT space. So with that, I brought two colleagues of mine on this call that are trying to keep me in charge, trying to keep me in order, I should say. Yeah. And we'll start with Brad, man. We'll introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brad Seals, and I do incident response and threat detection engineering at 1898. I work for Gabe, and I came here after 10 years in the United States Navy, where I supported expeditionary and cybersecurity operations, to include working at the Navy Cyber Defensive Operation Command, which is kind of like the SOC of the Navy and their fleet of sensors out there. And I spent some time out and around the Fort Meade area, and as the pandemic was hitting, I was transitioning out, and the social engineering campaigns that I ran on various industrial cybersecurity consultancies started to yield some fruit, and I got my white whale, Burns & McDonnell, 125-year-old architectural engineering and consulting firm that was right down the road from the Rust Belt that I grew up in, right? So it was a name in the household, and I can't tell you how pleased I was to earlier this year find out that the guy who wrote what I consider to be one of the most direct and actionable tomes on industrial cyber that was modern and relevant was being picked up by Mr. Gabriel Sanchez here to come and work with us. So when he came on board, I told him that he'd been working here a lot longer than he realized, because the way that the words went on the page made sense to me. And it was resounding truth is resounding to all. So that's the kind of philosophy, mindset, and shape of the way that I've approached being actionable in industrial cyber.
Yeah.
But Gabe brought us together. So over to you, bud.
Good job, Gabe.
Yes. So Gabriel Sanchez, been doing cybersecurity for, the 90s. For anyone that gets glimpses at the video, you'll be able to see some antiques in the background. Early 2000s, I was actually getting out of college and actually, getting paid to do what we call cybersecurity today, but was basically doing DoD type contracting. Didn't really realize I was doing cybersecurity at the time. It was basically, organization that was doing different type of missile simulations, and they say you need to protect our network, right? And so that was kind of cybersecurity for me, learning on the job. And then after that, I went into the electric utility space for about a decade, and that's really where it was very new. I basically went into a position that hadn't existed before. They said build the entire cybersecurity program. What I thought was going to be 2 years turned into about a decade. After that, went into the banking industry, kind of at a global scale, supporting about 80,000 employees, doing cybersecurity there for operations centers. And now I sit today leading the Advanced Threat Protection Center, trying to make sure I keep Brett and Pascal happy as much as possible. So although sometimes they say that they work for me, it's kind of really the other way around. I basically work for them to make them happy. So based out of Houston, we run an Advanced Threat Protection Center, and it's kind of like Pascal said, a security operations center with an OT focus.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that Mac on your desk looks similar to mine over there in the corner. So that was my very first Mac computer back in the day. My first computer was a Tandy TRS-80.
I got a trash 80 that controls the lights in my underground bunker here.
There you go.
Oh, geez.
Let's hope it keeps running.
Hey, it's the most dependable computer I have.
Yeah, exactly. Well, awesome. So, that's what I love about this industry is I think most of us really got this and we came through it. Like we didn't go get a degree in OT cybersecurity because we were around before it existed. Like we were in the marketplace before OT cyber was a thing. We didn't even call it OT. Like very similar. I worked in power utility and I've worked in critical manufacturing in some of those places, but a lot of my career was spent in power generation and transmission distribution. And I got kind of shoehorned in because I worked in IT. I did networking. I did systems administration and Active Directory and Exchange and all that kind of stuff in corporate America. And I brought those skill sets to this place and like, hey, we have to design a secure network and NERC SIP and all these things. Nobody knew what to do. They were control engineers and they were doing the best they could, but that's not their skill set, right? So a lot of the people like us that are out there, most of us have that type of story. Like we started out here and we transitioned and all of a sudden now we're doing this OT cyber stuff. And that's a good thing because with that, we bring the experience of being a controls engineer first, right? So when Pascal's looking at a problem, he's not coming from, some cybersecurity textbook he read and he's bringing that thing down. He's like, I was a control engineer. We're not doing that here. This is why, and we can do it. We just have to do it differently, right? So that's the conversation I have all the time. And I love the experiences that we bring from that perspective, from the plant side, right?
And that can be a very difficult conversation too, right? You go into a site and there's ransomware everywhere and they'll be like, what do we do? Do we pull the plug on stuff? I'm like, well, what happens if we do, right? If you lose your HMI, if you take this switch down, what's it going to affect the rest of the process? And people be like, no, okay, maybe if I take this HMI off, now I can't control my steam engine, my steam turbine. Maybe we shouldn't do that. So it makes for a really tough situation, tough conversations once you get into those scenarios.
Absolutely. It's a different, OT, we have the same problems that they have in IT. We have a lot of the same tech stack nowadays that they have in IT. It just, how we deal with resolutions are different. Like what I do, right of boom, and even left of boom, but specifically right of boom is going to be different, right? In an IT world, I may kick something off the network, force things off, reboot, a lot of those things. In OT, from my experience, a lot of time that's picking up the phone and calling the control room. Hey, something's going on. What can you do? Do you know what's going on? And
what
do you
am I
see
allowed
this?
to do? What am I allowed
Exactly.
to touch right now?
Right.
You know, my time in Southeast Asia, there's a saying there. I actually have a shirt I wore the other day. On the front it says same, but different on the
Right.
back. Right. You know, because there are so many things that are same, but different. Because earlier today, I was having a conversation with somebody talking about the way that I've customized the NIST IR 8428. I'm not sure if you're savvy, but I think it's a fantastic framework to be able to custom tailor, right?
So talk about it a little bit. Explain what it is for sure.
Yeah, sure. So it is an OT DFIR framework that NIST put out 2-3 years ago now. And it has it's a framework, right? So it's a way for you to be able to generalize and abstract the specifics of your process environment. And I tune it to make it a specific thing that we can fit our playbooks, run books, whatever we want to call them, based off of the magic words of our client's industry or culture,
Sure.
Right? Because, you know, being able to look at that first initial phase where we're doing incident alert detection, there's analogs between what happens in the control room and what happens in the SOC, right? I'm doing, each event has attributes, to use the object-oriented programming terminology, right?
Mm-hmm.
The criteria of those attributes are what constitutes our priority and our communication, our response playbooks in relationship to it. And the same thing is true in OT, except for the most urgent criteria is the plant manager having to put his hard hat on, right? And if he has to go down onto the floor, then that's an urgent problem. We've have enough downtime to where Bob had to get his hard hat, and nobody wants Bob's feet on that floor, right? Whereas on the other side of things, we're being able to make the urgent assessment of whether or not it's a legitimate root level intrusion of a perimeter or DMZ asset.
Yeah.
Right? But the correlation between those two data sources is how we still conduct root cause analysis the same way, and we share the findings from one another. And all throughout the incident lifecycle, it's like that. I'm getting data sources the same way from OT that I am from IT, because a lot of the IT systems that now overlap with that OT environment and the detection sources are from a mature process environment detection system that came from the legitimate need of asset inventory or discovery, to be more accurate. But.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of frameworks out there, but I think you hit on a good point there, right? That framework is really a common language that we know how to talk about things, right? It's whether choose one, right? I've implemented lots of different frameworks, and you can argue NIST 853 is better, or NIST 872, or any of the frameworks that are out there, which is better. I don't think it matters as much which one you choose. I think there are some that are more applicable to your industry, maybe. But even any one that you choose, it's fine. Pick one, and that's the language that you use to write the policies and procedures, to implement the capabilities and the controls. It's just a language. It's a dictionary that you go, hey, what is an incident? What is a response? What is threat detection? Like, what are those words? So we know we're talking about the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. An authoritative reference to stand on.
Right.
And you'll find that you'll pick one, right? Hopefully you pick one because, well, imperfect security right now is better than perfect security never, right? Just pick a direction. And you'll find that after a couple of years, you'll be like, this is nice. I did the NIST cybersecurity framework or whatever, the NIST DFIR, and it fits my needs about 90%. What else is out there? But now you got the terminology. Now you got the know-how. Now you got your environmental awareness to see, okay, maybe something from the ISA portfolio is better suited for me. But you have the ability to ask those questions and to have that knowledge.
So what? Go ahead.
Real quick, and Aaron, you might have run into this like in the utility space, but one of the key thing for us is, for example, for me in the utility space, safety, and we could argue OT overall, safety is a huge thing, but what programs does that specific sector have? And then how can you implement, and Brett uses the words like tuning, or we can even get frameworks. How do we kind of implement those pieces into what they have already, what they've been doing as part of their safety program and kind of risk analysis for decades, right? And that's a bridge, talking the common language, and then also getting it to still kind of feel the same with the same outcomes, which is basically making sure you can operationalize, whatever it is that critical sector is doing while keeping, safety in mind has been kind of a key piece.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these places, again, we all came from more of an operational role. Many of us in OT have, and it's very common to see safety is important. Safety and availability. If the CIA triad, I don't care about confidentiality. I care about availability, and I usually associate availability and safety. There's a kind of, parallels, right? And availability and safety trumps everything else. It's not that I don't care about confidentiality. It's just not the priority. The most important thing is to control and make it safe, right?
The way that I sell it is that the idea of CIA and IT and OT, we have safety, reliability, and productivity, right? And that's the paramount. That's the triad that governs our OT cybersecurity programs, because another quick and easy analogy that is attached to this, in IT we have 0 days, in OT we have forever days, right? It's a completely different foundational philosophy. And as the IT guy who went OT, right, it made me want to rip my skin off. It was terrible. Right? Like it's an awful thing, but it's just a reality of these high availability environments that are also easily to measure whether or not they're actually stable. Right. They're so consistent.
Yeah. They don't change, right? Sun Tzu, Art of War. I'm not patching every day. I'm not updating every year. I'm not replacing all my hardware. We've all been in places where equipment's been there for 40 years and it is reliable and consistent and capable. And I see a lot of OT cybersecurity pundits, well, you can't scan the network, then it's not safe. You shouldn't rip it out. You shouldn't be dependent upon something that I can't scan. And that's just asinine,
that's
right?
Wrong. Even the stuff that's not reliable, if it's an integral part of your process, it's gonna have to run, right? I've been in environments where they had a 386, and every day it would overheat, but it would run. It would run like the most core part of the process, the standardization of the milk standardization process. I think I went around, but anyway. But they couldn't replace it, so every day they would pull out the plug, put it back in, reboot it, and start the process. So and after about 20 years of that, they finally decided to move it all to a PLC, and that was a $1 million project to get it off that 386 onto like a standardization PLC. So I know why they didn't do it, but in the meantime, they need to keep running.
This 386 reminds me of a realization. Sometimes you learn things that you learned as a kid, but you remember them as an adult and they have a whole new context, right? So when I was a kid, my mom and I had a Tandy 386 with a floppy drive. We got an extra SCSI drive, right? And I didn't understand why it is for the longest time, because I was on the peak of Mount Stupid through my cybersecurity journey for so long and continue to be in so many other ways. Why it was that I had to, I typed before I could actually read, because there was a book, a compiled book. But now I understand that it's because the system binaries for the shared objects on that operating system at the time was not universal enough for all the drivers that were being required. So you had to compile the binaries on the 386, because Lord knows what kind of weird drivers that were required to run your sound blasters by Creative Labs, Right. And that's really an analog as well to the reason that $1 million project happened on something that somebody bought in 1985 for $1,000, maybe even that, right?
Well, I mean, Gabriel, you came from power utility, and every turbo control cabinet you walk up to has "do not key mic" when this cabinet is open, right?
Yep, exactly. Yes, absolutely. It absolutely did.
And there's a reason for that. Could they get equipment? So could you just say, oh, well, that equipment's not good because you can't key a mic? Well, that's a risk. And yes, and that's the conversation I think we have so often. And the biggest struggle I see from IT practitioners and cybersecurity, folks that come into the OT space, it's hard to wrap their head around sometimes that 386 that's running in the corner, don't touch it. Leave it alone. And it may cost $5 million now to replace that thing. And this site only makes $1 million a year. So I would lose money if I replace that thing. But if it doesn't work, then the whole place shuts down. So it's that risk reward conversation of when is it risky enough that I need to replace it or mitigate versus just leave it alone, accept the risk of, I know I have to reboot it every day, but as long as it works, that's a lower risk than replacing the PLC that isn't guaranteed to work in a short period of time. And the cost, it may take me 10 years to recoup that cost because the margins are so small, right? And that's a different conversation in OT that the IT folks, they just throw capital dollars at it and, replace, with brand new MacBooks or, whatever, and put it to the cloud. And that's just not the same in OT.
No.
If you can even refine the replacement, right, for stuff like that, it's just like, on the IT side, you go to the next greatest and latest database server, you upgrade that stuff. And there's situations where you can, but in most situations, if you throw enough money at it, you can fix it. And on the OT side, I've been in situations where you can have all the money you want, but if a vendor doesn't exist anymore and you're running that Windows NT blow molding machine, and you need to have a replacement for that NT, better hope that you get a backup with at least the software that you need installed because...
Well, and it goes back to that availability and reliability, right? We've all had Windows machines, Mac, newer technology, and yes, it's way more capable. We've got GPUs and all the stuff that can do is incredible. But what I want to depend my life on, like if this was a life-saving device, and I was scuba diving and this computer was controlling my oxygen and I was a mile below the surface of the water and I was depending on a Macintosh or a Windows 11 machine, am I going to put my life and expect it and then allow people to patch it while I'm under the water?
Well, a lot higher consequences, right? And that kind of brings us to, and this is probably a bad word, right? It brings us to a lot of that IT convergence, right? And I know a lot of people don't like that. Yeah, I know we got a drink already. That buzzword of the convergence, but I do think there's convergence with responsibility, with convergence with people, but it's not necessarily always a convergence in the approach, right? Like to your point, the approach is different, the culture is different. And I think sometimes, at least I know I sometimes will take it for granted because I've been through the IT, I've been through the whole OT experience and kind of back and forth. But there's a lot of organizations that it seems natural to say, well, I have an operations center that's with IT. Well, now I'm just going to extend that into the OT because there are similarities with software and there are similarities with they need to protect their networks and firewalls and so forth. But the approach is just a very, very, very different thing. And the risks are much higher. And then how do you have operators have enough confidence that someone that is maybe a tier one that does your initial triaging as a typical operations center knows to make the right call to say, hey, I think you should do this, when you got the operator who's been, boots on the ground for 15, 20 years and saying, what does this person know about OT, right? So I know I just opened up a can of worms.
Everybody's ready to jump in, I see.
Are you saying that I shouldn't send an Nmap TAC T4 just because I learned it at a SANS class?
No,
is
T4
that a
is
bad
fine,
idea?
just not a T5.
No, T5,
sorry,
right?
Not all the way. Is that right?
What?
Yeah, T5 is insane speed as T5, but
I was trying to be conservative. Okay.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Well, but it's funny because again, IT OT convergence, and I agree that there are things that we can. For instance, let's pick an easy one. We both have firewalls. We have firewalls in OT. We have firewalls in IT. There's a prime example of how you can use and leverage your IT organization who probably has a firewall organization, and that's all these people do is firewall. And you can use their knowledge to help you make sure your policies are good and that, your firewall rules are good and you don't have any innies and things like that we see all the time in OT, right? But the prime example that I also see is telecom, and a lot of folks use telecom or their networking organization because, again, we're using Cisco switches or whatever switches in these OT spaces. Well, why wouldn't I just have telecom support them? And the prime example I always ask, and I'm not saying that they can't, and a lot of organizations have been successful, but when that plant that runs 24/7, when that switch fails at 3:00 in the morning on a Saturday, they don't want to put in a ticket and wait 3 weeks to get a replacement. They need it now. So what happens is if you put it with a dependency upon an IT organization that does not have the SLAs to support the needs of the facility, then what do? They go to Walmart and they replace it with a D-Link off the shelf because they need the plant to work. And then they kick IT out and say, you are not supporting me anymore because obviously you're not supporting me anyways. So I'm not going to let you in my facility anymore. And we're going to do it on our own. And we're going to leverage our vendors and our INSAF, our controls engineers that are smarter than you anyways about our process. And we're going to do it our way. And it may not be your secure way, but it works. And your way left me in the dirt and it wasn't working. And I've seen that at every kind of facility you can imagine. Why is that D-Link there? We had to go through IT. They didn't support us. So we went to Best Buy and got a switch and it works and we're not touching it. Don't even look at it.
I haven't just seen that. I've done that in my previous life, right? Control engineer. Middle of the night. Okay, who do we call? Well, IT. Beep, beep, beep. We'll be there between 1 a.m., between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. Bye-bye. So what do? You go to something that's open 24/7.
Yep.
Thank God we still had fries at that time. But, and then you do what you need, right? Because production, it's not going to be the IT folks who have to go to the plant managers and say, well, we had downtime because we couldn't get our ass out of bed. But it's going to be us having to say that. But yeah.
Well, and that goes back to why another example of why it's different, right? And it's not just the technology stack is very similar. So if you look at it on paper, it's really easy to see, well, I can leverage my IT organization, but it's that people, process, and technology. And Pascal, you just hit on something. Your bonus was probably tied to the availability of that plant.
Yeah.
IT's organization is not. So when it goes down, your bonus, your paycheck, your job is literally on the line. Theirs is not.
And then you're trying to get a hold of them, so that could be.
And they're best cases, again, power plants. They're in the middle of nowhere. They're, I worked at TXU or Luminate or Vista or whatever the heck you want to call it. We were at, headquarters was in Dallas. Well, my power plant is 6 hours away. All the IT people are there. They don't have IT staff in the middle of nowhere at my power plant because it's too expensive. It makes sense, but I have to have a way to get this thing back up and running. So I lean on a Pascal type person, and he's going to go to Fry's or Best Buy, or he's going to go pull a switch out of his house, whatever he has to do to get it up and running. And we've all seen it.
I'll send it to the cloud if I have to.
Right.
Yeah,
whatever.
Talk about opening up a can.
Yeah.
Getting out of the military, one of the things that I didn't expect was all the fun cultural measurements that you had to do as a consultant, right? Is considerably different because it's a much more stable culture in the military.
Sure.
But I quickly come to understand that and make the joke that, we are kind of like marriage counselors for OT and IT, right? Like everybody has different requirements out there in the dynamic of what makes an organization, and reminding and having an objective third party kind of help connect the dots between, hey guys, your requirements actually align to the same business objectives. So this is how you support each other. And it's a natural check and balance that you have between these two parties to be able to maintain safety, reliability, and productivity. Right. And, the stories that I've heard are some version of, 20 or so years ago, we had the IT guys come in here at the site. They gave us these Cisco switches, didn't have the real-time packet requirements of our protocols. So we ended up getting burnt, didn't get the good maintenance contracts that we expected, had to get swapped out, kicked them out. Now we have corporate IT, right? And the analogs are still there locally at the site. That's typically the configuration that's gone into. But now our OT engineers and the process control guys, maintenance guys, their positions have expanded to include all this cyber stuff.
Yep.
And they're ready to see some help, but they have to learn how to love again, Aaron. There's not trust, That's where we talk about advocacy training and, not being too aggressive in communication.
Yep.
But
here's the kicker though. So here's the kicker from all of those companies, organizations I've been with, the ones who do OT and OT cybersecurity, the best are the ones who have it figured out, right? How to have IT and OT work together. That might have like an IT centric, a business centric acquisition program where they get their equipment, but then they have an OT person who does the maintenance, who does the uptime, who does the patches and stuff, so that they know what the schedule is about. They don't reboot a switch in the middle of the night. No, they actually communicate with the OT team. Hey, we need to do this update. I need to get some available time, and then they work with them to get that implemented. So the companies who do that IT OT liaison the best, and it could be a one person, it could be a team, but the ones that do that are typically the best at doing cybersecurity for the entire organization as well. And I've seen a lot of that, a lot of progress. When I wrote my first book, 10 years ago now, that wasn't there. It was like IT, OT, they didn't like each other. They actually were in each other's way for a lot of things. But it has come a long, long way. Where I'm starting to see the difference now is more into the response of things. So they're really good at segmentation. A lot of customers or a lot of organizations really started to push for architecture that's defendable. They've installed network security monitoring tools and asset management systems or asset discovery systems. But now they're being overwhelmed with all of this extra data they're getting. So what to do with these events? What does it mean to have Frosty Goop going around that? Is that really relevant for my system, right? And that's honestly the reason I joined the 1898 team, because I've had those conversations with so many asset owners that I'm like, we need to come up with something that we can support them. And I think the MSSP that we built is a fantastic way to go out there and help customers say, no, don't worry about Frosty Goop, because you're an Ethernet IP shop, right? It's not gonna affect your environment.
Yeah, and people don't know what they don't know, right? They see what's in the news. We see these nation state attackers going after all these things. There's more and more, fear and, the sky's falling, do everything. And again, the OT market hasn't helped the vendor market of, pushing that fear to sell fear sells. We know that. But as an asset owner and as a, provider and a service provider, consultant, MSSP, all those things, at the end of the day, the good ones like us want to help. And I don't want to just sell you something to sell you something. That's not what I want. We all want to help, because at the end of the day, I'm dependent upon this electricity to work and the gas to get there and my Amazon order to arrive and all the things that we like, right? It's Christmas and Pascal's got his hat on, right? Tis the season to order stuff. And we want that stuff to work. So it's dependent upon, all of these things working. And to your point, Pascal, like I see the biggest challenge, and I'm excited to see a change, and I've seen it in my career as well, is OT and IT. We're on the same team, right? We're literally on the same team with the same goals. And yes, maybe you're, on the offense and I'm on the defense, or we're on special teams, or whatever analogy you want to give, but we have the same jersey. Like, remember that we're not enemies. We're not opposing forces. We're literally protecting the same. We want the same protection for these assets. We may do it a different way or come at it from a different perspective, but we all have the same goal of protecting these assets and making sure that it's available and safe and reliable and capable and all of those things that aligns with the business organization, right? And it's just a matter of making sure those teams talk and they network and they have relationships. And I know, hey, I need to do this, and this is a concern I have. And I reach out to Pascal and say, hey, this thing came up and we're doing these things in IT. Is that something we need to worry about in the OT space? And he could say, yeah, it's not really a problem here for this, and this reason. But like, okay, we'll note that, right?
No, finding the ways to be able to connect and not just, find common ground between those integration points between IT and OT, but also be able to do support functions. Right, to be able to use automation capabilities and data analytics to be able to gain observations about how to improve the production process, the safety. Like, there's a lot of money that is left on the ground that could be weaponized from some of the data that comes off of security tools in these environments too, because that's again where it all started off from: monitoring process states.
Yep.
But drawing those two together, and I'm glad I got here when I did. I also feel like I lucked out because I'm on the tipping point that kind of people were at with OSHA in the 70s that I've heard from a lot of my family members about how everybody was real frustrated about having to pay to implement all these controls. But once they got in place and they actually had more uptime from less loss of life and injury, right?
Yep.
So like we're on the other side of that one now. People appreciate the risks enough to know it's not fairy tales, but we still have some work to do on what I heard here is how we started the call, workforce development, that culture aspect, right?
Yep.
Hearts and minds.
Well, I mean, when I started this at Vistra, doing this, it was really because of NERC is why the company had allocated budgets towards this, but I didn't have budget. So when I was rolling out, going to these, we were literally doing control system upgrades at all these plants, and they were having to implement NERC. So they were medium sites. We were segmenting units. So they were, they wouldn't hit that 1500 minute and 1500 megawatt and 15 minute timeline. So they'd be a low impact, which had different requirements than medium. All that to say, when I went to these sites, I wasn't saying, hey, I want to do cybersecurity stuff. I was going in saying, hey, I can get you better availability, better visibility, and understanding of your assets. Is that something that would be valuable to you? Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Now, on the back end, I was getting all the cyber stuff that I wanted, but they don't care, especially 12 years ago. They didn't care about that. Nobody cared about. And the answer, anytime anybody came in about cybersecurity, the plant manager would say the same thing. Unplug it from the network. I don't care about cybersecurity.
Yeah, but you've, like to your example, you've tied that into metrics that they now care about. So I think that was super important because they've been living with metrics for a long time. How long have the lights been on? How long have we been, doing our production? The assembly, line's is not broken, right? And so tying that into metrics without necessarily just, rushing at them with the cybersecurity piece is a really good approach.
Yeah.
And it's knowing your audience too, because I'm pretty sure the people you told that story to, or you told those advantages to of the solution you were implementing, were probably engineers, maybe management of a plant. So those are typically, they love that asset management, maybe some sessions, seeing in there what kind of traffic, what anomalies. Hey, what's this new system? But the higher up you go, the more they're distant, the more they go to like an Excel sheet type. Okay, if I install this, it's going to cost me a little bit extra. But in the long run, I'm preventing a cyber breach, which if you look like a competitor is going to save you $1 million for every occurrence, or 10 million, whatever that is nowadays. So it's really about finding the audience.
Yeah, one of my favorites is about the visibility of just vendors that are even authorized to be on their network, but it's only at certain times. Now they're getting visibility into, wait a minute, why did they log in at this time or over the weekend, right? So it's not always the big bad hacker. Sometimes it's just a matter of just what's going on, who's coming in and out of my house. Now I see that and I know it. I better lock things down.
Turns out the integrator that you hired had a layer 2 VPN connection into your process environment, and it's auto start on his computer.
Oops. Yeah, give you accidental for sure.
I literally did an assessment at a power plant in October in West Texas, and there were 3G modems sitting on the outside of the pack. And I asked the engineer what that was for, and he said, the vibration monitor vendor has remote access through that system, so it completely bypassed everything, and it went straight in. Now, the vibration monitoring system didn't have control, so they say. I said, but what happens if it trips because it detects vibration? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's probably going to have a trip, don't you think? If that turbine is out of alignment, you don't think they're going to trip the unit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm like, maybe we should look at that.
Would you call it BCSI? Is there any kind of stuff about the bulk
even if it's just a jump point, right? Even if it's not properly secured and it's just a jump point directly from the internet to your internal network with the rest of your control system, eventually, if it's not doing control right now, but you're wide open to the internet, eventually that's going to be a control point because somebody's going to find that hole and it's going to get on your network and either deliberately or by accident knock something over.
Yeah.
The old story of how the casino got hacked from a fish tank thermometer. Yeah. I mean, it's out there in the streets, kids. Be careful.
Well, it's the same thing with Target, right? When Target got attacked, they didn't come in the front door. They went in through a subcontractor and came in the back door, right? That's the way these things happen. A hacker's going to go the path of least resistance. And the other thing that I always hear is, well, we're too small. Why would anybody want to attack us? Like, I think we know now. They look at Shodan. They find, if they can see you, they're going to, it's there. I saw you. Like
the opportunity.
We also
ground.
Yeah.
Training ground, right?
We all saw War Games back in the day where he was just dialing trying to get a video game and ended up in the wrong computer, which obviously that was a video or was a movie, but still it's the same thing. Like they're just playing around. I remember when again, this is dating my technology, but I remember when I first got the very first cable modem, high speed internet, and cable modem at that time was shared network. So when they plug in, you're on a shared network with all of your other neighbors, and it's on a, /24 network. So I just started pinging around and finding other computers, and then I found a printer shared. So then I printed something to one of my neighbors, like "I see you" or something.
Did you try
annoying
and
like
connect
that
to him on Microsoft Net meetings too? There's a deep cut from that era. I remember that stuff, dude. Yeah, that was bad. It was bad.
But that's the way it was, right?
Availability.
Yeah. It's because I could. I wasn't malicious. I didn't break anything. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was just being stupid because it was fun.
One of the things that's the coolest about working where we do is that I have the ability to, like, I was going to go talk to a client about trains. So I went and talked to a guy that has worked on trains and nothing but trains as an engineer for the last 30 years. Right. And when I was asking him about these automated braking systems and how they're set up, and I was kind of describing the type of attack profile that I was like workshopping with him, and he didn't realize I was weaponizing him. Right. But when I was like, so could that work? And he was like, well, yeah, but why? Why would you do that? And I was like, yeah, exactly. That's why.
Because you can, right?
It is
because
that
it's available
sometimes. Yeah. Because they just want it to work.
Right.
It's form over function, and that's why security always falls off by design unless it is such a requirement that it makes it just appreciated instantly by the people who are building it, and it stays through the development of the thing. Right? It has to be there from the beginning and stay in there. Otherwise, you'll be bolting it on forever.
Some interesting use cases that I see, just real quick, Aaron. Interesting use cases that I see sometimes is where IT getting impact, ransomware, doesn't matter what it is, right?
Sure.
And where they'll just all of a sudden go into just, let's shut down all of OT or completely, close
air
it
gap
off. Yeah, air gap it, or let's do something because we don't know if OT is impacted or not, or we don't know what the root cause is, or we don't know how far the hackers got in. And so I'm hoping that's a trend, that we start seeing that we get away from, where you don't even have the visibility to know whether your OT has been impacted or not, or how far that threat actor got from your business network into your OT, right? And we see, countless examples, a lot of it hit the news where, well, OT has not been impacted and OT has not been breached, but we're doing it just to be on the safe side because we know IT did. And it's like, well, you kind of had the same outcome, right?
Yeah, it's still OT is impacted. You got to stop your production.
Technically, it was impacted because, you have no signs of breach, but you still ended up causing the same effect, right? And so that's hopefully a trend I'd like to see us get away from as well. But
so we talked about the people problem, not the problem, but one of the bigger value adds is that workforce development and training and camaraderie and coming together as a team. From a technology perspective, what do you guys see as one of the bigger hurdles that we're still facing? I know some of the ones that we've already talked about in the past, but what are some of the ones that are coming up in the next bit that could be an issue to implement and do it in the right way without impacting OT?
I actually see something that's got both of those tied into it, and that's cloud and AI. So because we see a big shortage in the workspace, right, and it's on the OT cybersecurity side, but it's also on the OT controls engineering side, right? It's really hard to get dedicated people for your controls environment. So I can foresee within the next 5 to 10 years, most of those control systems going to the cloud. And I'm not saying that's good or bad at this point, but I can see them moving to the cloud where you have like your PLC and your HMI and your whole process environment in the cloud, and you have your remote IO sitting in your process space, of course, because you can't get around that. But just so that organized companies, like big companies, like the big engineering companies, can support that remotely without having to have dedicated remote access into your plants. So that's the one reason I see that coming. I'm not looking forward to that, because now you're putting a lot of eggs in that one cloud basket, and if anything goes wrong, it can have devastating impact on your environment.
Yeah, but I do see I agree with you, Pascal. But I also see with a lot of the tool sets, whether we're doing it on cloud, whether we're doing it on-prem, I see a big hurdle when it comes to a certain technology or tool from the whole passive, versus active. Can I, a lot of, critical infrastructure still want to do, just to be on the safe side, everything passive, passive. And I think, and I'm hoping, and we're starting to see the trend move away from that, where there's been more confidence built up into, okay, well, maybe a tad bit more risk to do something active or to ping in this way or scan in this way, but doing it in a responsible way. We're getting a lot more out of knowing exactly what did this PLC actually do, as opposed to let's just rely on everything, as far as network monitoring or whatever comes up with the wire. It's now kind of a little bit more of an intentional kind of, let's do a little bit deeper than just a passive, type scan, and do something that's more. And so I see that as a hurdle that OT still kind of struggles with.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm working with one of your teammates, who I'm talking about at that power utility. This was back in 2012, I think it was. It was before any of these passive tools existed. So we took commercially off the shelf IT stuff, NAC, and we were scanning OT environments in critical power generation sites using IT off the shelf stuff. And we did it without incident. But it's not like we were in-map scanning randomly and just, going after the stuff. Like, we were doing it intentionally, and we were very cautious in how we did it. But we rolled out active capabilities again back in 2012, and luckily, it was probably because nobody had all the war stories and heard that you can't do active. Right. And now everybody believes that you can't do active. Yeah. And there was no passive option that didn't exist. So we had to bring in, again, we did, NAC and Splunk and What's Up Gold and IT tools in a power plant running VMware.
To be done. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and when I came here and met, our mutual friend and the team that he was hired onto, it was the first time in a long time that I had seen magic on a computer screen, right? With Terraform, being able to use OpenTofu, I think is what they're going to call it now, to automatically instantiate environments, writing code based off of describing a thing instead of making it do a thing. Right. And knowing how that could be weaponized with adversary attack platforms, C2 infrastructure, malleable profiles for callbacks that can be handed over seamlessly between something that didn't exist before the attack and won't exist after. Right. That same technology, though, can be weaponized to create highly available environments that are cross-cloud domain and are shared distributed workloads between data centers and cloud resources as well. Right. So there's flips of that. We can build those protection domains from CompSci 101, right? Inside of how we integrate these new technologies, but it is something that is going to require a scalpel and not a hatchet.
Correct.
100%.
And it's like, just like the human body, all of us are a little bit different, right? We're different sizes and we have different whatever. Like I can go to a power company, Duke Energy, Vistra, Nextera, you name it, and I can go to two of their plants that are right next door to each other, and they will not be the same. They'll have different controls, they'll have different integrations, they'll have different HMIs, they'll have different processes. All of those things are going to be different. Even beyond that, I can go to two units in the same plant, and those 2 units will be different. And that blows people's mind. Obviously it doesn't us because we see it all the time, but it's to that level of difference. And it's because they're on different upgrade schedules, and, upgrade unit 1 this year and unit 2 next year and unit 3 in 6 years because the budget got pushed out or whatever that reason is. A prime example of that is we bought a power plant, again, years ago, and there were 3 plants that this and it may have been Burns and Mac that built it. I don't remember, but whatever engineering company that designed it, Fluor, whomever it was, when they designed it, they built 3 plants, and they took that one plant design and they built 3 different locations. So exact same schematics. The hardware was the same. The turbines were the same. The boilers were the same. Like everything about it was the same. 2 of them were owned by a power company, and 1 was bought by a financial company. The whole reason and point of my story is after 20 years, the power company did control system upgrades and all the different things. And the financial company, that was their only power plant. They didn't do anything to it. It was exactly the same as the day that it was built. It still ran. It still was reliable. It still produced generation and electricity. But when you walked in, it was Sun micro stations and, all of the things that were implemented 20 years ago and never upgraded. And it just shows the difference in the 2 different sites because of when it started out, they were all on the same level playing field, but every outage over 20 years, they just grew apart from where they started to where they are today.
That's a wild evolution, literally driven by environmental variables.
Correct.
Right. That's it's almost like twin study cases.
Yeah.
Of the rich twin, the poor twin. Like how that went down. That's fascinating. Here.
Makes it interesting because every decision you make along from year to year could actually just completely changes the makeup of how you either might protect it or what it looks like and everything else to it. Right. So it kind of like, the example we were talking about earlier, if you had to go to Best Buy just to make it work and that was your best option, yep, that solution actually will probably survive for years and years because it's now just working. And like you said, you better not look at it, you don't touch it, everything's good now. Right. You might have a D-Link there that lasts 8 years because of just that moment in time where that decision had to be made. So that's really
and again, if you look at, and this is where we've got to as an industry, stop looking at, well, you have a D-Link there, or it's not a managed switch, or it's a out of support switch, or it's a Windows XP machine, or whatever that is. And we really need to get back to, is it providing it? Is it doing its job? Is it reliable? And why would I replace it? Like my dad worked in the power utility industry for 40 years. And they used to have a saying that he still says today. He's 75, 76 years old. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They don't just replace things because there's a new version. Like you don't, it's like today's generation, you need new tires on your car, so you go buy a new car. No, replace the damn tires. Like you don't need a new car. Your car works. It's reliable. It gets you from point A to point B. You can upgrade the radio. You don't have to buy a new car. I'm not telling you not to. I'm not telling you shouldn't. I'm just saying you don't have to.
Yeah, it's a different mentality for sure.
It is, right? But IT is, I'm going to replace it every 2 years. I'm going to give you a new laptop. Like my monitor.
Leasing it, right? We're leasing our equipment. I wish we could do that on the OT side. Oh, every 2 years, Rockwell's going to give me new PLCs and you're going to take your old stuff back. But yeah, if you could do that, it's probably not very feasible because between those revisions, you have to redo your whole PLC program, your I/O modules, your communications, the downtime behind it. So wishful thinking.
Well, and you do a control system upgrade at a power plant, and it could be, let's use Emerson or Foxborough or whatever vendor you want to talk to. When you do that upgrade in 3 years, you may have to change your field IO terminations. Like it's not just replacing a computer, right? Yeah. Sometimes you're having to rewire things, physical things. And that takes time. And if it doesn't work and maybe a wire's wrong, then you got to rerun a wire. Like it's bigger than just, I'm going to give you a new laptop, right? It's not that simple.
Aaron, I think the first time that I heard somebody tell me that they have had an active infection of Conficker in their process environment and they were just living with it like bed bugs, it was shocking and a little disappointing. But I mean, it's still kind of like surprising when it happens, but it still happens, Aaron, right? And it's okay. Right? It sounds counterintuitive, but if it doesn't affect the stability of the system and it can't go down because it's so available, then I guess it's okay.
Right.
I've been in situations where they let WannaCry run, and you know what I'm talking about, which one I'm talking about, Aaron, but they had WannaCry all over the place. We installed a cybersecurity monitoring, OT cybersecurity monitoring solution, and it started popping up like 10, 20, 30, 40 stations with WannaCry. And they're like, well, we're still running production. And once we get to it, we'll get to it. But until then, we're just going to let this run. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to connect any of my personal stuff on your network for a while.
But again, that's the different mentality. And that right there is so hard for people to grasp that haven't worked in this industry. And you're going to if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like it really comes down to that thing and that doesn't mean you just let WannaCry run forever. I've actually seen environments where Stuxnet is running. But there was no applicable system that Stuxnet could impact, right?
It was the most prolific for the time, right? Yeah. I mean, and to again go back to the beginning of the call, because this is all coming full circle. The Navy, I learned at a C&P conference when I was a junior sailor, like all public information on this. Sure. Right? It's just me being an analyst, being like, oh, that's weird. I know what those words mean. I found out that the payments system for the United States Navy, the thing that cut my check, it was based off of the same language that Amazing Grace Hopper wrote. That's right, the lady who coined the term computer bug, COBOL. So whenever it would break, they had to bring somebody out of retirement because they haven't taught COBOL that I'm aware of in colleges probably since the late 90s. I know some guys that were in some of those last classes around here in these parts. So yeah, no, it's just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it though. But when it breaks, boy, oh boy, does it break.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no. And making sure that we're doing what we can in our part to be able to defend the global mission and protect critical infrastructure for humanity. Like I think 3 days of a widespread utility outage would cause some pretty severe chaos that maybe genies that don't go back in bottles. And doing everything that I can. Getting out of the military was very strategic coming here to be able to have a greater impact on how I could help out with that. And I found nothing but brothers and sisters with the same intent since I've gotten out. So I've found more of a tribe leaving a tribe that people typically have a hard time translating from. But I'm happy to be here with these two guys. We take good care of each other, and I'm thankful to be able to hang out with you today, man. This was fun.
Yeah, I mean that goes to I always ask that wrap up question. We already kind of answered it with the technology stack, and what you just answered there is probably the negative side or the scary side. But I mean, we can look back to Katrina and New Orleans and see what happens when you lose power to an area for any period of time. And it was within a day, and it was martial law. It was scary. Everything stops working, right? And same thing in North Carolina when they took the substation out, and that entire county was without power for a week, and you can't pump gas. The refrigeration doesn't work. Your water doesn't work. Like everything is dependent upon electricity. Everything, right? And that goes down, and we are a third world country like that. Very quickly.
People forget now my kids are worried about the internet when it goes out, right? It was the electricity for me when I was a kid. Yeah, as long as the Wi-Fi, as long as dad's battery backup works, then we're good, right? Yep. But then everybody forgets about, and they're typically have some of the bigger challenges, water.
Yep.
Right? Like that really, you forget how much of a caveman you really are until somebody shuts off the water to your house.
Correct.
Right. You get a clogged sink, you have a main that pops, and then all of a sudden you're thinking about the Holiday Inn. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I got enough snow on the ground to have water for a while.
I've got the air conditioner on in Texas. It's like 70 degrees today. It's nice and hot. I'm actually taking a side note. I'm taking my family. So again, I live in Texas. My kids have grown up in Texas. So we're going after Christmas. We're taking a vacation. A friend of mine has a house in Minnesota. So I'm taking the kids to Minnesota so they can experience like what actual weather and winter, what it actually feels like. Go ice fishing and do all those fun, real cold weather type stuff.
Nice.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because you won't get that.
No, not here. So what's call to action, guys? Like how do people find out more about you guys, what you guys do, where you're going to be, conferences, speaking events, like all that type of stuff? Like lay it on us.
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So anybody who pings me there, and a lot of people do for like advice on where to go next with their studies, where to look for jobs and stuff like that. I'm very active. I always share stuff on there. You can ping me up on there. You can go to our 1898 & Co. website and contact us through there. So in terms of speaking, Gabe, what we got on the plan?
I mean, S4, we will be at S4 as well, coming up in February. So
in Tampa this year.
In Tampa this year. So feel free to meet up with us there as well. That's the conference I know. That's the one coming up as far as I think we'll be at the Hughes SecCon. I think OT SecCon in Houston area will be there as well.
Awesome.
Gabe and Pascal don't let me out of this bunker very often.
No, actually, we do. We're taking you to Belgium. Remember, we're going to do the ISA conference. So that's
the
European
right. I met
ISA
my targets
conference
this year.
ISA conference. I think that's in June. Yeah, sometime in June will be ISA conference. So
that's the funny thing is these problems are not just America focused. They are nationwide. They are countrywide. They're border. They don't depend on borders, or the bad actors don't really care where the thing is, right? And they're just going to see, like we said earlier, like open for opportunity. So it takes a village for us to protect this nationwide, and we see what's going on in the Ukraine and Israel and Gaza and all. And again, not to get political, but just from an impact and availability and all of the downstream things that can happen from power not being available, water not being available. We depend on electricity and clean water to live the way that we do and the way that we've got accustomed to. And to your point, like my power goes out and I've got everything on battery backup, and my wife's in there, still surfing a phone, and there's no electricity, and I'm like, don't you wonder how this still works when we have no electricity? And she's like, I never really thought about it.
You're welcome.
Exactly.
For sure.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate y'all taking the time today. As always, it was a great conversation. I look forward to seeing you guys in person at S4 and other times as well. Thank you again so much for being here and fighting the good fight. I really appreciate it, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.